She called 911 to kick me off my own ranch. Then the deputies realized I was the sheriff. I inherited the ranch on a Tuesday morning that smelled like rain and dust. 2,000 acres of open land, rolling hills, a weathered barn, and a dirt road that had existed longer than the town itself. My grandfather worked this land before there even was an HOA, before the highway, before the manicured subdivision that now pressed against my southern fence line. The paperwork was clean. The surveys were older than the county courthouse. I moved in quietly, fixed fences, and kept to myself. That peace lasted exactly 3 weeks. The afternoon sun sat heavy and copper-colored over the eastern pasture that Thursday, turning the dry grass the shade of old parchment. I was halfway through replacing a busted fence post-hole digger in hand, sweat already darkening the collar of my work shirt, when I heard the low, expensive growl of an engine coming up the long caliche drive. Not a ranch truck, not a feed delivery, something sleeker, something that didn't belong. A white SUV, newer than anything parked at the feed store, rolled to a stop 20 yards from the barn, tires crunching gravel with the confidence of someone who'd never once changed a flat. The driver's door opened and out stepped a woman who looked like she'd been photoshopped straight out of a real estate brochure. Mid-40s maybe, oversized tortoiseshell sunglasses, cream linen blazer despite the heat, clipboard clutched to her chest like it was bulletproof. Her heels, actual heels, clicked once on the running board, then sank half an inch into the dirt when she hit the ground. She didn't walk so much as advance. "I'm with the HOA," she announced before I'd even set the digger down. No hello, no introduction, just the title delivered like a badge and a warrant at the same time. I wiped my forehead with the back of my forearm and glanced past her at the empty horizon. Miles of nothing but mesquite, and the occasional longhorn. My barn squatted in the middle distance like it had been there since the Comanches left. The only structure for 3 miles in any direction was the one she was currently trying to evict me from. "Ma'am," I said, keeping my voice level, "this is my ranch." She tilted her head, the way people do when they're explaining something obvious to a child. "This land is reserved for residents only. You're not on the approved occupancy list." I looked behind me again, half expecting to see a subdivision had sprouted while I wasn't looking. Nothing. Just cattle nosing through the grass and a red-tailed hawk turning lazy circles 1,000 feet up. "I've lived here 23 years, I told her. "Paid off the note 8 years ago. Taxes are current, title's in my name." She flipped a page on the clipboard without looking at it. That may have been the case previously, but covenants have evolved. Community standards now apply countywide under the Umbrella Alliance. Your parcel falls within the extraterritorial jurisdiction of Whispering Oaks Estates, which has reciprocal enforcement agreements with Saddle Ridge, the enclave at Cedar Bend, and, she paused for effect, Prairie Vista Ranches. I let out a slow breath. Prairie Vista Ranches is 40 miles west of here, past 3 different school districts. "Precisely," she said, as though I'd finally caught on. "That's why we're modernizing the enforcement footprint, efficiency, equity, shared amenities." I leaned on the post-hole digger. Shared amenities. "Yes, my son Ethan, he's a sophomore at Legacy Christian Academy, needs a regulation-size practice field. The HOA park was double-booked for flag football and a charity color run. The school's turf is being reseeded. This," she swept an arm across my east pasture like she was unveiling a prize, "is ideal, flat, open, no neighbors to complain about noise." I followed the gesture. About 200 head of Angus and Hereford were currently using that ideal space to stand around and chew. One of the older cows lifted her head and stared at the woman the way only cattle can, total, unimpressed indifference. "Ma'am, those are my cattle," I said. "They live here, they eat here. I gestured vaguely toward the ground, do other things here." She made a small dismissive sound, the kind you make when someone mentions an inconvenience you've already decided doesn't exist. "We can relocate them temporarily. There are liability waivers." I have forms. I almost laughed, almost. Instead, I asked the question that had been burning since she stepped out of the SUV. Which HOA do you actually represent? She smiled then, bright, professional, utterly empty. All of them. I waited for the punchline. It didn't come. You're saying you work for every homeowners association in the county. Not just the county, she corrected. The regional coalition. We've consolidated enforcement under a single authority to reduce redundancy and streamline compliance. It's really quite forward-thinking. You'd be surprised how many people appreciate the consistency. I rubbed the back of my neck. And you believe this coalition has jurisdiction over my deeded ranch land that's never been part of any subdivision. Zoning overlays, she said smoothly. The comprehensive plan update of 2024 included agricultural exclusion sunset provisions. Phase-in period ends next quarter. You're in the grace window right now, which is why I'm here, to help you transition smoothly. Transition? Yes, relocation assistance is available. We have several lovely patio home lots opening in Phase 6 of the enclave. Gated, lawn service included, very low maintenance. I looked down at my boots, covered in red dirt and cow manure, then back at her pristine white SUV. I'm good here. Her smile tightened a fraction. I'm afraid it's not optional. Notices have been mailed, certified, return receipt requested. If you haven't received them, that's a postal service issue, not ours. I get my mail at the post office in town, I said. Box 417, always have. She checked something on the clipboard. That would explain the discrepancy. We've been using the 911 address on file, which, per the new GIS mapping initiative, places this parcel inside the enhanced service boundary. I stared at her for a long beat. Somewhere behind us, one of the calves let out a bawl that sounded suspiciously like agreement. Lady, I finally said, you're standing on private property. No HOA, no covenant, no enhanced service boundary. Just me, my cows, and about 700 acres that have been in my family since before there was a zoning department to draw lines on. She adjusted her sunglasses. Be that as it may, the coalition has determined that unused open space contributes to community blight. Ethan's training program qualifies as a public benefit use under the new Recreational Access Ordinance. We're prepared to offer fair market compensation for temporary easement. Temporary easement. 3 afternoons a week, 2 hours each, April through November. We bring portable goalposts. No permanent structures. Ethan's very responsible. He picks up his cones. I glanced at the pasture again. The sun was dropping lower now, painting long shadows from the mesquites. A windmill creaked in the distance, slow and steady, the only mechanical sound for miles. Tell Ethan he's welcome to practice, I said. Right after he learns how to open a gate without me having to chase 8 steers back into the North 40 because someone left it swinging. Her lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, the clipboard lowered an inch. This doesn't have to be adversarial, she said. We're here to help. I picked up the post hole digger again, tapped the blade once against the dirt. Appreciate the offer, but I've got fence to set before dark. And unless you've got a badge that says sheriff or a court order signed by a judge, I'm going to ask you to get back in your vehicle and leave my land. She stood there another long second, clipboard still clutched like a shield. Then she turned slow, deliberate, clicked back to the SUV and opened the door. You'll be hearing from our legal committee, she said over her shoulder. This isn't over. I watched the white SUV reverse in a tidy 3-point turn, gravel popping under the tires like distant gunfire. Taillights flared red. Then the vehicle disappeared down the long drive, swallowed by dust and distance. I drove the new post into the ground with slow, deliberate swings. Somewhere out in the pasture, the old cow lowed again, long, lazy, and perfectly unbothered. I smiled for the first time all afternoon. She was right about one thing. This wasn't over. Not even close. I turned back toward the barn, figuring the white SUV would kick up dust and vanish down the county road the same way it came. Another city ghost story that never quite materialized. I drove the last staple into the cedar post with a satisfying thunk, wiped my hands on my jeans, and started walking the line to check the tension. The afternoon was still quiet except for the low mutter of cattle and the occasional grasshopper popping through the dry blades. 10 minutes, maybe 12. Then I heard the voice again, sharper this time, clipped theatrical. I glanced over, she hadn't left. The woman stood beside the open driver's door of her SUV, phone pressed to her ear, free hand gesturing in wide arcs like she was conducting an invisible orchestra. She was packing in tight little circles, heels sinking and popping back out of the caliche with every turn. The tortoiseshell sunglasses were pushed up into her hair now, revealing eyes that flicked toward me every few seconds. "Yes, hello," she said, loud enough that I didn't have to strain. "This is Karen Whitaker with the Regional Coalition of Homeowners Associations. I'm currently on site at," she glanced at a clipboard page she'd apparently pulled from the passenger seat, parcel 47392 in unincorporated Kendall County. "There is a man here who is refusing to vacate private property under an active recreational use notice. He is becoming aggressive. I feel unsafe." I stopped walking. Aggressive. I looked down at my right hand, still holding the fence-post driver, basically a 12-pound sledge with a flat end. I hadn't swung it since she pulled up, hadn't raised my voice once, hadn't even taken more than 3 steps in her direction. She locked eyes with me while she spoke, nodding dramatically like the dispatcher on the other end was personally applauding her courage. "Yes, he's still here. He's holding a large metal tool. I asked him politely to leave and he refused. He said something about cows having more rights than children, which I found threatening." I let out a short, disbelieving breath through my nose. She kept going. "My son needs this land for athletic training. It's been designated. There are waivers and everything. This man is obstructing a public benefit use. I need assistance immediately. Please send someone. I'm alone out here." A pause while she listened. Her face softened into something almost triumphant. "Yes, thank you. I'll stay on the line until help arrives. My location is," she rattled off the 911 address I'd never used, the one the county GIS had slapped on my ranch without asking. "And please hurry. He's staring at me right now." She lowered the phone slightly but didn't hang up. Instead, she gave me a small, satisfied smile. The smile of someone who has just played the ace they keep up their sleeve. I set the post driver down on the ground with deliberate slowness, letting the iron clank against a rock so she could hear it. Then I raised both hands, palms out, and took 2 large steps backward toward the barn. "Ma'am," I called, keeping my voice conversational, "you're still on my deeded property. The gate you drove through has a chain and a no trespassing sign. You're welcome to wait for whoever's coming, but I'm going inside to get a glass of water. You're not invited in." Her smile flickered. She lifted the phone again. "He just threatened to go inside and lock me out. I think he's trying to isolate me." I shook my head and kept walking, slow, no sudden moves. The barn door was 30 yards away. I could already feel the cool shade waiting just inside. Behind me, her voice rose a half octave. "Yes, he's walking away now, toward a large structure. I don't know what he's planning. Please tell them to use lights and siren. I don't want to escalate this, but I'm genuinely frightened." I reached the barn, pushed the sliding door open with my shoulder, and stepped into the dim smell of hay and motor oil. The old rotary phone on the workbench still worked, landline, never bothered to cancel it. I picked up the receiver, dialed 911 myself, and waited for the tone. "Kendall County 911, what's your emergency?" "Hey darling," I said. "It's Ray at the Double Cross. Got a situation out here. Lady drove onto the place uninvited, won't leave, just called you folks saying I'm aggressive and threatening her. I'm standing in my barn right now, hands empty, door open so she can see me. I'm not moving toward her. Just wanted you to have both sides before a deputy burns an hour on gravel roads for nothing." A short pause. I could hear Darlene's keyboard clicking. "Ray, we've got a call open right now. Female complainant says she's with an HOA group, claims trespassing and intimidation. You're the property owner. Been here since 03, tax rolls will show it. She's parked beside my east fence line, maybe 30 yards from the barn, white Lexus-looking SUV. License starts with," I squinted through the open door, "starts with K something. Can't read the rest from here." Another pause, typing. "Okay, Ray, I've noted your statement. Deputies already en route, ETA about 25 minutes. Stay where you are, keep hands visible, don't approach the vehicle. I'll stay on the line with you." "Appreciate it." I set the receiver on the bench so the line stayed open and leaned against a stack of hay bales, arms crossed. Outside, the woman was still packing, still talking, though her volume had dropped. Every so often she glanced toward the barn, then quickly away, like she was afraid I'd materialized behind her if she stared too long. The sun slid another notch lower. Cattle drifted closer to the stock tank, lowing softly. A mockingbird landed on the ridge cap of the barn and started running through its entire repertoire: cat, dog, car alarm, telephone ring. 23 minutes later, I heard the faint wail of a siren cresting the rise 2 miles out. Blue lights flickered against the mesquite tops long before the cruiser appeared. The woman straightened, smoothed her blazer and stepped forward to meet it, clipboard ready, victim posture perfected. I stayed put. Darlene's voice crackled through the phone. "Ray, deputy's on scene. He's talking to her now. Hang tight." I watched through the open door as the Deputy Morales, I recognized the silhouette, listened to her for a solid 4 minutes. She gestured toward the pasture, toward the barn, toward me. Morales nodded, wrote something on his pad, glanced my way once. Then he started walking toward the barn. I stepped outside, hands still visible, and met him halfway. "Afternoon, Ray," he said, touching the brim of his hat. "Afternoon, Enrique." He jerked his thumb back toward the SUV. "Lady says you threatened her, says this land been rezoned for community use and you're interfering with her kids' football practice." I lifted one shoulder. She drove past the no trespassing sign, past the gate I keep chained. Told me to leave my own ranch because her boy needs a place to kick a ball. I told her no, politely. That's the whole story. Morales sighed the sigh of a man who's heard this movie before. "She's got paperwork, thick stack. Coalition this, overlay that. I told her I'd need to see a court order before I could make anyone leave deeded ground. She's unhappy." Imagine that. He glanced back at her. She was standing beside her SUV now, arms folded, watching us like we were deciding her fate. "Look," Morales said, lowering his voice. "I can't make her leave until I run all this through the sergeant and maybe the county attorney. Takes time. In the meantime, she's asking for a standby while she secures the perimeter." I snorted, "Perimeter?" "Yeah, I told her no, but she's not budging. Says she'll wait here until her legal team arrives tomorrow." I looked past him. The woman was on her phone again, speaking rapidly. "Ray," Morales said, "I'm not gonna arrest you on this. Not today. But if she stays parked there, we're probably gonna have words again before sundown. You good to just let it ride for now?" I studied the horizon a moment. The red-tailed hawk was back, higher now, riding thermals like it owned the sky. "Yeah," I said finally, "I'm good. Long as she stays on her side of the fence line, she can wait all she wants. Cows won't mind the company." Morales gave a tired grin. "I'll tell her you're cooperating, see if that calms her down." He touched his hat again and started back toward the cruiser. I returned to the barn doorway, picked up the receiver. "Darling, you still there?" "Right here, Ray." "Think you could patch me through to animal control?" A beat, then a chuckle. "What for?" "Tell 'em I've got a stray SUV on the place. Might need to dart it and relocate before it spooks the herd." She laughed outright. I hung up, leaned against the jamb, and watched the deputy try, without much success, to convince the woman to leave. Somewhere out in the pasture, one of the old cows lifted her head and bawled long and low. It sounded a lot like agreement. We waited in silence. She stood 20 yards away with arms crossed tight across her cream blazer, clipboard now tucked under one elbow like a rifle at port arms. Every few seconds she lifted her chin and scanned the horizon, as though willing the cavalry to appear faster. I leaned against the tailgate of my old F-250, boots crossed at the ankles, hat tipped back so the brim shaded my eyes. The post-hole digger rested against the truck bed beside me. I hadn't touched it since setting the receiver down. No need. The afternoon was warm, the breeze light, and the cattle had drifted closer to watch, like they sensed theater coming. 5 minutes stretched into 8. Then I heard the low rumble of tires on caliche long before I saw lights. A Kendall County Patrol car crested the rise first, dust boiling behind it like smoke from a grass fire. 30 seconds later, a second cruiser followed. Then a third, bigger, the supervisor's Tahoe with the light bar. 3 vehicles total, not the one deputy response she'd probably expected. Her smile grew wider with each new arrival. She uncrossed her arms, smoothed the front of her blazer, and took 2 confident steps forward. "Good," she said, loud enough for me to hear. "They'll remove you." I didn't answer, just watched. The first deputy to step out was Enrique Morales again. He'd barely had time to get back to the substation after the last call. He shut the door, adjusted his duty belt, and started walking toward us. Then he saw me standing there, same spot, same posture. He froze mid-stride. His eyes flicked from me to the woman, then back to me. Recognition hit like a cold bucket of well water. He straightened instantly, shoulders squaring the way they do when protocol kicks in. "Sheriff," he said, not loud, not shouting, just clear, respectful, and carrying across the quiet pasture. The color drained from her face, so fast I half expected to see it puddle in the dirt at her heels. She blinked once, twice. The clipboard slipped an inch lower. "Sheriff," she repeated, voice thinner now. I touched the brim of my hat in acknowledgement but stayed where I was. No need to crowd anyone. Morales cleared his throat and gestured toward the second arriving vehicle. The driver's door opened and out stepped Sheriff Harlan Hank Whitaker, no relation to her far as I knew, though the coincidence of the last name would probably haunt her for years. Hank was 62, built like a retired linebacker who still lifted, and had worn the star since I was in high school. He didn't hurry. Never did. But when he moved, things got decided. He walked over, boots crunching deliberate gravel, eyes scanning the scene. Me at the truck, her beside the white SUV, 3 patrol units parked in a loose semicircle, cattle lowing in the background like a bored audience. "Afternoon, Ray," he said to me first. Same easy tone he'd used when we were both younger and he was still Deputy Whitaker. "Afternoon, Hank." Then he turned to her. "Ma'am, Deputy Morales tells me you placed a 911 call reporting a trespass and an aggressive subject on what you believe to be community property." She recovered faster than I expected. The clipboard came back up like a shield. "Yes, Sheriff. I'm Karen Whitaker, Regional Coalition Enforcement Director. This parcel is under an active recreational use designation. The occupant is refusing to vacate and has been uncooperative. I requested immediate assistance for safety reasons." Hank listened without interrupting. When she finished, he nodded once, slow. "Uh-huh." He pulled a small notepad from his shirt pocket, flipped it open, clicked a pen. "And you say the subject is refusing to leave private property?" "Correct. His private property." She hesitated. It falls within the coalition's enhanced jurisdiction. There are overlays, reciprocal agreements. Hank held up a hand, not angry, just done. Ma'am, I've known this land since before GIS even existed. Ray Calder owns it outright, deeded since 2003. No subdivision covenants, no POA, no HOA overlay that I'm aware of, and I'd be aware, because anything that big would have crossed my desk during the 2024 comp plan hearings. Her mouth opened, closed. Hank kept going, voice calm, almost gentle. We ran your name when the first call came in. Coalition's real enough, mostly serves the new developments out by Bowen and Fair Oaks, but their enforcement authority stops at the property lines of member associations. They can't just redraw county maps because someone's kid needs a soccer field. He glanced at me. Ray says you drove past a chained gate and a no trespassing sign. That true? She swallowed. I needed to speak with the occupant about compliance. On posted private property, without invitation. Silence stretched. One of the newer deputies, a kid I didn't recognize, shifted his weight and looked anywhere but at her. Hank sighed the sigh of a man who's had this conversation too many times lately. Here, how this works, Ms. Whitaker. This is unincorporated Kendall County. Criminal trespass requires entry without effective consent on posted or fenced land. You're the one who entered. Ray's the one who's been standing here minding his own business. If anyone's leaving today under escort, it's not him. Her face went from pale to blotchy red. But my son. Your son can practice football on any field his school or association actually controls. Hank cut in, not unkindly. Not on a working cattle ranch 7 miles from the nearest subdivision. We've got no court order, no injunction, no writ saying otherwise. So unless you've got paperwork hotter than what's in your hand, this call is done. She stared at him, then at me, then at the 3 cruisers. The wind picked up, rattling dry grass. Somewhere a calf bawled. I'll need to consult legal, she said finally, voice small. You do that. Hank closed the notepad. In the meantime, I'm going to ask you to remove your vehicle from Mr. Calder's property. Politely. Right now. If you'd like one of my deputies to follow you to the gate to make sure you don't get lost, they'll be happy to. She didn't answer right away. Just stood there gripping the clipboard so hard the metal clip creaked. Then she turned stiff, mechanical, walked to the SUV, opened the door and slid inside without another word. Engine started. Reverse lights came on. She backed up in a slow, careful arc, tires crunching, dust rising. The 3 cruisers waited until her taillights disappeared over the rise. Hank walked over to me last. She'll be back, he said, with lawyers, maybe even a temporary restraining order if she's got a friendly judge. I know. You want me to have someone swing by tomorrow, just in case. I shook my head. I've got cameras on the gate now, motion lights, and the dogs'll bark if a jackrabbit farts wrong. I'll call if I need you. He chuckled. You always were stubborn as hell, Ray. Learned from the best. He clapped me on the shoulder once, hard, then headed back to his Tahoe. The other units followed, peeling off one by one until the road was empty again, except for dust settling slow in the golden light. I watched it all fade, then turned back to the fence line. The new post stood straight and solid. Cattle nosed closer, curious now that the excitement was over. I picked up the post driver, hefted it once. Somewhere out in the pasture, an old cow lifted her head and let out a long, satisfied low. It sounded a lot like the end of round 1. She laughed nervously, a short, brittle sound that cracked in the dry air like old leather. That's not funny, she said, glancing between the deputies and the tall man in the plain khaki shirt who had just stepped out of the supervisor's Tahoe. He's impersonating an officer. That's a felony. You can't just. The second deputy, the younger one who'd arrived in the second cruiser, removed his hat slowly, almost ceremonially. He held it against his chest like he was at a funeral. "Yes, ma'am," he said, voice flat and patient. "This is the county sheriff. You called us onto his property." Her clipboard slipped from her hands. It hit the caliche with a flat slap, pages fanning open. One sheet caught the breeze and skittered a few feet before lodging against a clump of dried bluestem. She didn't move to pick it up. Her arms hung at her sides now, useless, like someone had cut the strings. I didn't know," she stammered. The words came out small, almost childlike. "I thought the coalition has authority. We have maps, we have agreements. The 2024 overlay." Sheriff Hank Whitaker didn't interrupt. He didn't need to. He just stood there, arms folded, letting the silence do the work. 30 years on the job had taught him that sometimes the loudest thing in the room is what isn't said. She looked from him to Deputy Morales, then to the younger deputy, then finally, reluctantly back to me. I hadn't moved from the tailgate of the truck, still leaning, still calm. The post driver lay on the ground now, forgotten. I waited until her eyes met mine. "Your HOA doesn't own this land," I said evenly, "and your son doesn't need it." The words landed soft, but they landed. She flinched anyway. She opened her mouth, closed it, tried again. "But the notices, the recreational use designation, Ethan's coach said we could." "Ethan's coach doesn't sign deeds," Hank said quietly. "Neither does any HOA director. This is private property, always has been. You drove past 2 no trespassing signs and a locked gate to get here. That's not a mistake, that's a choice." Her gaze dropped to the clipboard on the ground. The wind flipped another page. Something official-looking fluttered free, a color-printed map with red hatching over what I recognized as my east pasture. She stared at it like it had betrayed her. "I was told," she started, then trailed off. Hank stepped forward, not close, just enough to close the circle of attention. "Ma'am, I've seen this before. New developments push out, someone gets a bright idea about underutilized land. They draw lines on a screen, print letterhead, hand out titles. Next thing you know, they're knocking on doors that were never theirs to knock on. You're the enforcement arm. You got sent because you're good at following instructions. But instructions don't override a recorded deed." She swallowed hard. "There's a grievance process, an appeal I can file." "You can file whatever you want from your office," Hank said. "Not from here, not today." The younger deputy cleared his throat. "Ms. Whitaker, I'm going to need you to step back into your vehicle now. We'll escort you to the county road. You're free to leave under your own power, or we can make it official. Your choice." She looked around one last time, at the 3 cruisers, at the cattle watching with lazy curiosity, at the barn that had stood longer than any of us had been alive, at me. Then the fight went out of her like air from a punctured tire. She bent stiffly, mechanically, and picked up the clipboard. A few loose pages had scattered. She didn't chase them. She clutched what remained to her chest and walked back to the white SUV, each step slower than the last. The door opened with a soft click. She slid inside, engine started, reverse lights glowed. This time there was no dramatic 3-point turn. She backed straight down the drive, slow and careful, gravel crunching under the tires like quiet defeat. The dust plume rose behind her, thinner than before, and when she reached the gate she stopped just long enough to wait for Deputy Morales to unlock the chain and swing it open. Then she was gone. The cruisers idled another minute. Hank walked over to me last. "She'll lawyer up," he said. "Probably try for an injunction or some kind of declaratory judgment. Might even get a hearing if they find the right judge." I figured. "You want protection. I can put a deputy on the gate for a few days." I shook my head. Cameras caught everything. Gate cam, barn cam, even the one on the windmill. If they come back with paper, I'll read it. If they come back without, I'll call you. Hank studied me a moment, then nodded, stubborn as ever. "Family trait." He clapped my shoulder once, same spot as before, and headed back to his Tahoe. The other units followed, peeling away until the road was empty again. Just me, the truck, the fence line, and the long afternoon shadows stretching east. I bent and picked up one of the loose pages that had blown free. It was a form letter on thick, glossy stock. Final notice, recreational access authorization. Parcel 47392. Subject property, immediate compliance required. Failure to vacate may result in civil and/or criminal remedies. I folded it once, twice, and tucked it into my shirt pocket. Out in the pasture, the old cow, the one who always seemed to know when something interesting was happening, lifted her head and let out a single, long low. It rolled across the grass like distant thunder. I smiled. She was right. This wasn't over. But for the first time that day, I felt like I was the one setting the terms. I walked back to the fence, hefted the post driver, and drove the next staple home with a slow, satisfying swing. The sun dropped lower. The cattle drifted toward water. And somewhere down the county road, a white SUV was heading back toward pavement, subdivisions, and people who still believed maps could rewrite reality. They'd learn. Eventually. I didn't rush. There was no need. I walked the 20 paces back to my truck, slow, deliberate, the way you move when you know the other side has already lost but hasn't admitted it yet. The tailgate was still down from earlier. I reached under the toolbox, pulled out the battered manila envelope I kept there for exactly these kinds of afternoons. Thick, dog-eared, smelling faintly of diesel and old coffee. I carried it over, not to her, but to where Sheriff Hank Whitaker and Deputy Morales were standing. The younger deputy hovered a few feet back, arms folded, watching like he was waiting for the second act. I set the envelope on the hood of my truck and slid out the top document first. The original 1954 warranty deed, yellowed but legible, with the heavy black stamp of Kendall County Clerk across the bottom right corner. Then the 1987 boundary survey plat, blue line print, still crisp in its mylar sleeve, followed by the 2003 quitclaim that transferred title to me after Dad passed. Every page carried the same unbroken chain, Calder to Calder to Calder. No easements granted, no dedications, no reciprocal use bullshit. I tapped the survey plat once with my index finger. This ranch predates your HOA by 72 years. I said, voice level, loud enough for everyone to hear but not raised. Your residents have been cutting across it illegally for months. Four-wheelers, side-by-sides, kids on dirt bikes. I've got tire tracks deep enough to plant fence posts in. I've got game camera stills time-stamped. I've got video of a white GMC Sierra, Texas plate ending in 472, dragging a down gate last spring. I sent the footage to your coalition office twice. Never got a reply. She opened her mouth. I raised a hand, not angry, just firm. And you made a false emergency call. The deputies exchanged looks. Morales shifted his weight. The younger one's eyebrows climbed halfway to his hairline. Hank Whitaker tilted his head slightly. False report to a peace officer is a Class B misdemeanor in Texas, ma'am. Up to 180 days in county and a fine. We usually don't go that route on first offenses, but he let the sentence hang. Her face had gone from blotchy red to something closer to chalk. The clipboard, still clutched like a life preserver, was trembling now. Not dramatically, just enough that the metal clip rattled faintly. I wasn't trying to, she swallowed. I believed I had authority. The regional director said the overlays were binding. He said the recreational designation superseded older titles during the transition period. Hank didn't blink. Who's your regional director? Preston Caldwell. He's very experienced in land use matters. Hank gave a small, tired nod. Preston Caldwell. Yeah, I know Preston. He used to be a planning commissioner in Comal County till they asked him to resign. Something about conflict of interest disclosures he forgot to file. He looked at me. Ray, you still got those gate cam files. On the hard drive in the house, time-stamped, backed up to the cloud. I can burn a disk or email them right now if you want. The younger deputy spoke up for the first time. Sheriff, if there's video of unauthorized entry on posted private land, that's probable cause for criminal trespass citations. Multiple counts if it's been ongoing. She flinched like someone had snapped a rubber band against her wrist. Hank turned back to her. Ms. Whitaker, here, where we are. You entered posted private property without consent. You refused to leave when asked by the owner. You placed a 911 call alleging threats and aggression when the only thing Mr. Calder was holding was a fence-post driver he hadn't swung since you arrived. Now we've got documentation showing your coalition has known about unauthorized crossings for months and done nothing. That's not a good look. He paused, giving her room to speak. She didn't take it. Instead, she looked down at the survey plat still spread on my hood. The black ink lines stared back at her straight, unyielding, older than her entire career. I was just trying to help the community, she whispered. Ethan's team, they're state-bound this year. They needed space. Hank's voice softened a fraction. Not sympathy exactly, but the tone of a man who's seen too many good intentions go sideways. Then find space that's actually available. School fields, park district land, private leases, not a working cattle operation 7 miles from the nearest cul-de-sac. She nodded once, small, mechanical. I spoke again, quieter this time. I don't want to press charges today. I just want the cutting across to stop, the gate crashing, the trash, the kids tearing up my grass thinking it's public. Send out a real notice to your members. Tell them the shortcut's closed. Chain stays up. I'll even put up better signage if it helps. She looked up at me then, really looked, for the first time since she'd stepped out of the SUV. I'll make sure it gets circulated. Hank glanced at Morales. Deputy, you want to walk Ms. Whitaker to her vehicle. Make sure she gets turned around without any more misunderstandings. Morales nodded, yes, sir. She gathered what was left of her dignity, the clipboard, the few loose pages that hadn't blown away, and walked back to the white SUV. This time there was no drama in her steps, no clipped heels, just quiet defeat. The engine started. Reverse lights came on. She backed down the drive slowly, waited at the open gate while Morales relocked the chain behind her, then disappeared over the rise. The dust settled. Hank walked over to me, studied the survey plat still lying on the hood. 72 years, he said. That's a long time to hold title. Longer if you count the Spanish land grant my great-great-grandfather worked. He chuckled once. You gonna send that footage anyway? Already queued. Figured I'd give her a day to circulate the notice. If the tracks keep coming, I'll forward everything to your office and the county attorney. Good man, he clapped my shoulder. Call if anything changes, and Ray. Yeah. Next time she shows up with lawyers, make sure the cameras are rolling. I want popcorn for that one. I grinned despite myself. Deal. The cruisers idled a minute longer, then peeled off one by one. The road went quiet again. Cattle drifted back to grazing. A mockingbird started its evening repertoire from the top of the windmill. Cat, siren, telephone, all in perfect imitation. I rolled the survey plat carefully, slid it back into the envelope with the rest of the chain of title, and latched the toolbox. Then I walked to the new fence post, picked up the driver, and sank another staple with a single clean swing. Somewhere out in the pasture, the old cow lifted her head. One long low ball. Satisfied. Like she'd been waiting for the paperwork to catch up all along. She wasn't arrested, but she was cited. Deputy Morales handed her the stack of 3 pink tickets right there beside the open gate. False report to a peace officer, criminal trespass, and harassment by repeated unauthorized entry and communication. The citations weren't felony level, but they weren't parking tickets either. Each carried a mandatory court appearance in Kendall County Justice Court, plus fines that would sting even on a regional coalition salary. She accepted the papers with shaking hands, eyes fixed on the gravel like it might open up and swallow her. No one spoke while she folded them into her purse. No dramatic protests. No last-minute appeals to reason or community spirit. Just quiet, mechanical movements as she climbed back into the white SUV for the final time that day. Morales followed her down the long drive in his cruiser, lights off but close enough that she couldn't pretend the escort was optional. When they reached the county road, he waited until her taillights disappeared around the bend toward Bourne, then radioed in. Subject clear of property. Returning to service. I watched the dust settle from the porch, cold coffee in my hand. The sun had dropped behind the live oaks, turning the pasture the color of old copper. Cattle were stringing toward the stock tank in their usual slow parade. Everything looked exactly the same as it had at dawn. Except it was. The next morning I woke to the low rumble of heavy equipment before coffee was even brewed. I stepped outside barefoot, still in yesterday's work shirt, and saw two county trucks parked at the gate, one with a hydraulic post driver, the other pulling a flatbed trailer loaded with galvanized pipe and no trespass signs the size of billboards. Sheriff Hank Whitaker had made a phone call after he left. By noon, the entire east fence line, almost a mile and a half, had fresh 6-inch T-posts every 50 feet, bright orange county boundary markers bolted at eye level, and a new 16-foot sliding gate welded from heavy pipe, padlocked with a county-issue master lock. A crew of 3 worked without small talk, staking, driving, tensioning wire. They finished just before dark, left a clipboard with signed work orders and a business card from the county engineer taped to my front door. The card read simply, "Per Sheriff's Office request, enhanced boundary demarcation, no charge, call if you need anything else." I framed it on the kitchen wall beside the 1954 deed. Seemed only right. A week later, the formal notice went out. I didn't draft it, didn't have to. Hank's office, working with the county attorney, sent a certified letter to the Regional Coalition of Homeowners Associations. Attention Preston Caldwell, Regional Director, CC'd to every board president of every member subdivision within 20 miles. 23 pages, single-spaced, heavy on statutory citations and light on mercy. Key points. Immediate cessation of any claim to recreational use access over parcel 47392, legal description attached. Revocation of any purported enhanced jurisdiction overlays applied without recorded easements or consent. Formal notice of ongoing unauthorized crossings documented by timestamped video and photographic evidence, available for discovery upon request. Demand that the coalition issue written notice to all member residents prohibiting further entry onto the property under penalty of criminal trespass prosecution. Reservation of all rights to pursue civil remedies for damages, including but not limited to property damage, lost forage value, and attorney fees. No exceptions, no negotiations, no further contact except through counsel. The letter arrived at coalition headquarters on a Tuesday. By Wednesday afternoon, my phone started ringing. Numbers I didn't recognize, 210 and 830 area codes, nervous voices asking if I was Mr. Calder, and if I'd consider a sit-down meeting to clear up any misunderstandings. I let them go to voicemail. Thursday morning, a courier showed up with a manila envelope hand-delivered from a San Antonio law firm that specialized in real estate defense. Inside, a 3-page letter on thick cream stock, offering amicable resolution, and a one-time payment of $7,500 as full and final settlement of any and all claims related to alleged trespass or interference. I read it twice, then added it to the growing file folder labeled simply Coalition. Friday, the coalition's website posted a terse announcement buried in the member portal. Important notice regarding access routes. Effective immediately, all members are reminded that certain unimproved roadways and adjacent parcels outside subdivision boundaries are private property and not available for pedestrian, vehicular, or recreational use. Please respect posted signage and use designated public routes only. Questions may be directed to the management office. No apology, no admission, just a quiet retreat disguised as policy clarification. Saturday, I walked the new fence line at first light. The county markers gleamed in the low sun. Fresh wire sang when I plucked it. The gate shut with a satisfying metallic clunk, padlock clicking home. Out in the pasture, the old cow, the one who always seemed to comment on major events, lifted her head from a patch of winter rye and watched me. She didn't bawl this time, just stared, chewing slow and deliberate, like she was finally satisfied the perimeter was secure. I touched the brim of my hat to her. Then I turned back toward the barn, coffee steaming in my hand, the ranch quiet except for the wind through the mesquite and the distant creak of the windmill. Consequences had arrived. Not loud, not flashy. Just steady, documented, and final. The coalition would probably regroup. Lawyers would bill hours. Someone might try another angle, perhaps a quiet push for eminent domain or a rezoning petition nobody would notice until it was too late. But they'd have to do it the hard way now. Through channels. With filings. Under scrutiny. And every step would be recorded on cameras that never blinked. I smiled into my coffee. For the first time in weeks, the ranch felt bigger.